Palmer. Jill Palmer tells me about her most important highlight was somehow giving a tour to a group of teachers of which you were a part, and somehow you asked them all the great questions because you're a Frewsburg type guy.
Well, a history teacher.
And as a result, she encouraged you to become a docent, and the rest is history, where you become one of the preeminent docents of the Jackson Center. Is there truth to all of this?
Well, I don't know if she encouraged me. It was the I was there for the retired teachers a luncheon, and after the luncheon they said, "Do you want a tour?" And I'd heard about the Jackson Center, and of course, teaching history in Frewsburg, where Jackson grew up and went to school, I knew quite a bit about Jackson. I said, "Sure, I would like to do that." So I took the tour, and at the end of the tour, you know, it's like the epiphany and saying, "Hey, I can do this." And so I went to whoever was, whether it was you or one of the ladies, and said, I'm volunteering to be a docent. What do I need and want to do? And that's the history of it.
So when you were in Frewsburg as a history teacher, and of course there's this elementary school named after him, what do you teach in Frewsburg? What's a normal course that might bring his name up?
Well, I taught starting in 1971, 8th grade American history. And the very first spring, would have been the spring of 72, one of the parts of the local curriculum was to encourage 8th graders and the 11th grade history teacher, encourage students to write an essay about part of the life of or the life of Robert H. Jackson. And there had already been a Jackson award was given every year at graduation to a graduating senior. But there were also, at the awards assembly, awards given to the best essay, 8th grade and 11th grade. And it was, you know, started out like 25 bucks, 50 bucks, 100 bucks. And so that very first spring, a carryover from the previous 8th grade teacher, their material was there saying they didn't have to do it, but there was some money involved. And so right from 72 on, every year, I had 8th graders who wrote that essay. And, you know, some of them were just, you know, whip something out. And some of them were, wow, this is pretty good. Hey, where did you find or where did you get this material? Yeah. And some of the material was in our own high school library. And I had a manila folder with Jackson material in it that they could borrow. And of course, there was also a display or information about Jackson at the Myers Memorial Library just across the street from the school. So, so for all those years, I read more and more about Robert H. Jackson from the 8th grade essays. And sometimes the high school, the 11th grade teacher would bring maybe the top 3 essays from the 11th graders and say, what do you think? You know, who, and I said, well, this kid won in 8th grade, and now they're 11th grader. And so let's keep looking, or this is obviously better than the 8th grade essay. And so I helped with deciding which one. And we also had, well, it was usually the top 1 or 2 students, the average of their 10th and 11th grade. So 10th is global, which Jackson was also global with what he did at Nuremberg and so forth. We helped to decide who was going to get the, you know, $500 for the Jackson, just the Jackson Award.
Do you know what the source of the money was that's honored Jackson?
Yeah, as far as I know, I dug in it a little bit just a few years ago, and said, where, you know, who's controlling this? Where's this money coming from? Because it was like $500 or more each year, and it was just automatically arriving at the school, and then I would give it out at graduation. Usually, I volunteered. I just said, I'm going to be up there anyways because I have a few other awards to give out. And so just give me the envelope, who's the student or students that got the award. And I would present it at graduation. So what I could find out was that Mrs. Jackson and possibly others in the family had purchased stock. And I think it was telephone stock. Mm-hmm. And of course, the telephone company back then has evolved or been bought out probably, or changed the name a couple of different times. But there's enough stock there to produce a $500 or $1,000 every year.
Is it held at the school?
No, I didn't delve into, do we ask for it? It's just, all I know is there's a check for $500, or two checks, and they came out of the business office.
Oh, interesting. That's probably worth an inquiry.
To see what else,
yeah.
But so all I was told was, this is telephone stock, and we're automatically getting this amount in the 1st of June every year.
It makes perfect sense. Jamestown Telephone Company, which Jackson was their counsel, J.H. Wright, best friend, and then it ultimately found its way to being Alltel, Windstream. I mean, it's all gone through various iterations. And he may, when he died, he probably, as he said, still had telephone stock, and therefore the family decided to take at least that particular stock and turn it into a trust fund for not a contest. That was a separate thing for the 8th and 11th grade. Okay. But just at graduation, 2 graduating seniors, highest grades, cumulative grades. So that's what it was, highest grade?
Yeah, in 10th and 11th grade.
Well, I'll be darned. That's just fascinating. Probably another assignment for you, Mel, before we get done to figure that out. There's got to be a source in that. So you taught at Frewsburg till when? When did you retire?
30 years, from 71 to 2001.
And when did you start at the Jackson Center? Do you remember about when?
Well, let's see. Let's see, 20, so it'd be 6-7 years ago. Mm-hmm. I don't remember exactly what year I started, but again, it's just been a treat to go in there occasionally. And I haven't been able to be a docent as much as I normally would, partly because there's a few other ladies and gentlemen that have retired in the last couple of years, and they dominate the calendar.
Really?
I go in there.
How does it work? Does they fill it in themselves?
Yeah, I mean, there's a calendar for this month and August and September. And so when I was in last week, I opened it up and went, whoa. Some people have said, I want Wednesday every week, because they enjoy doing it also. And so it just happened that when I was in for the tea that we had for individuals that support the Jackson Center, mm-hmm. and I went over and looked at the book, and said and saw that there were a couple of spaces left empty. Somebody was out of town or whatever. So I went, ooh. And so I put my name in, and then flipped to the next page, and the whole blooming month was full. So we do have, as I say, most organizations are always struggling to find coverage. And Jackson Center has been lucky that you have some really good docents and who are really interested in being there, like every Thursday or every Tuesday, and they enjoy their job.
So when you were asked about becoming a docent and they said, sure, Mel, love to have you, how did you get indoctrinated? Was there a booklet? Was there a a movie? Was there somebody that took you around?
Well, of course, there was the original docent who took me around, and so I picked up right away. And he says, "Oh, I'm familiar with this, this, and this," and I didn't know anything about the Kent Mansion, so it's just been a combination. Every day when I go in, I'm looking at the desk, and sometimes there is a pamphlet there, a booklet. There was quite an article written by Sarita Weeks, and so I just have read over anything and everything that has to do with the Kent Mansion and with the Jackson, and just so every time I go in, I learn. You learn something new every day.
Well, that I know that's the goal for all of us. And one of the things that you jumped out and raised your hand early on was we had interns through Professor Safferling in Germany. And they came here for a couple weeks. It was a relationship with their Erlangen Law School, and you quickly picked up on all of that, of just housing them and helping them and coordinating. How did you?
Well, the long story short background there was that I had German at Jamestown High School and 1 year of German at JCC, and then for the next 25 years didn't have any opportunity to speak it. And so 1 year when I saw an advertisement for exchange students through American Institute of Foreign Study, AIFS, and I thought, I think I'm going to contact them and ask for a student, fill out the forms, and they said, well, here are the countries that we have students. And right away, bingo, I said, I want a German, because I have some German background. And so I went, the next 18 years, I had a German exchange student. And during that period of time, after the student left, I would go to Germany to visit the family. And actually, once I had the first 2 or 3, I was going to Germany every summer for 2 weeks, and I would go to the new student that I had chosen, so that the father and the mother and the aunts and the uncles and the grandparents met me before their son went to America for a year, to Frewsburg. And it worked out, tremendously. So that was the German background or connection. Well, then when I heard the statement that we could have, that you may be having a German law, say an intern from Germany who was maybe not a lawyer yet, but working on it. And I just went, hey, at that time I had finished with the 18 German exchange students, and I said, hey, I have what I call the German room, the German bedroom. It has some German paintings and so forth in it that I've never taken down. So I said, I've got room, and this way you don't have to worry about the expense of housing the person. I says, I'll do that for free. And when he arrived, Herr Selleck, he, of course, the first couple of weeks, he didn't have a car, so I was bringing him up and dropping him off every morning. And so I said, I know, of course you know a few people around town, I said, let me go talk to a guy up at the Enterprise car rental who was a former student of mine, because after 30 years, I've got a lot of former 8th grade history students all over the place. And so I said, I have connections. We all do. We live on our connections. And so I set him up with a rental car, got a deal, on it. And so every time that Herr Selleck said, I need to do this, or I'm thinking about that, or I've got a day off, where should I go? And I'll fix that for you. So I became Mr. Fix-It for him. And when he came here to visit, and when we met him in Nuremberg, he said again, he says, "Hey, Mr. Fix-It, how you doing?"
Yep, I remember that, Nuremberg. We went to a restaurant, I believe he joined us, didn't he?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, he joined us at the restaurant, and well, there was a presentation, and he was able to get away to do that.
Yeah.
And 2 years before that, I had, in visiting some of my exchange students, had gone to Nuremberg and had contacted him, and so we met, and since his uncle was also a lawyer, connections, and so we got the VIP tour of the courthouse. So I had been in there where the Nuremberg trials had taken place 2 to 3 years before we went here for the celebration, and of course we went out for dinner and drinks and drinks and drinks. A little
An occasional sausage.
Ein bisschen beer, a little bit of beer. So it's great to have connections. And I must add, you haven't asked about it, but I look forward when people come in, when you ask them, okay, where are you from? And expecting, some of them are from the Jamestown or Chautauqua County area. But with Chautauqua Institution nearby, especially in July, August, I'm saying a couple comes in, or 4 people, maybe 6 people, staying at Chautauqua. Yes, we're down for the day because we've seen the brochure or the advertisement up there. And so where are you coming from? Is it Pittsburgh, New York, Cleveland, are the big ones? A few from Canada. And right away I'm starting to think, okay, what are our connections? What is there where have they been? Who do they know that I've been there or that I know? And almost invariably, sometimes it's by the middle, the end of the tour. We're down in the banquet room, and all of a sudden I say something or they say something, and I say, bing, there it is. There's our connection. And that's part of the 6 degrees of separation.
No question.
And I always bring that up with the one painting or the sketch from Sid Chevette's in the banquet room. I think you heard maybe say it once when we were down there about the connection. There's a drawing that's showing a few little girls with flowers, and their mothers are behind, and then some soldiers, and then the sign over the top, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free. No, it doesn't. Work makes you dead. It kills you. And I would tell them the story about that and say, when I first saw that sketch 6, 7, 8 years ago, right away I thought of a connection. One of my German one of my friends in Virginia married a German girl that he met up at Fredonia State. And she was raised in Osnabrück. Her mother and father they're 90-something now, still alive. And when I was in Germany, I went to and visited with the mother and the father and stayed overnight there. And she told me the story about how I wasn't sure the year, it was probably 1937, 36, this is before the war started, that she was on her father's shoulders at the age of like 4 or 5, and she had been given a bouquet of flowers, and there was somebody important was coming through Osnabrück for a speech or whatever, and she said, I didn't realize it at the time, but the flowers that I had were to be given to Adolf Hitler. And so she gave flowers to Adolf Hitler, and I know her, and you know me.
That's right.
That's just 3 degrees of separation with Adolf Hitler,
Right.
even today. So just bizarre things like that. That one of my former 8th graders Tom Nelson is still there teaching 11th grade history, and when it was more appropriate at that time for 11th graders, and when he started bringing 11th graders up to the Civic Center and so forth, sometimes even after I retired, he would ask me to join in as a chaperone or to help out. And we've done, let's see, 10 years, every other year for 10 years now, we take 55 students in March to Washington, D.C., and we start with seniors and then juniors and the sophomores, and fill a bus, 50 kids, 5 chaperones. And we go there in March, and we just push in 2 days in order to get to all the major, sites there. So and since I had taken most of my German exchange students before school started in August, or in June or July after they had graduated, they usually stuck around for 2 or 3 weeks, and I would take them to Washington, D.C.
That's a gracious thing to do. Do you remember any stories about some of your German exchange students from the Jackson Center days? A few of them come to mind of people who came here. I remember one couple, they were a couple, both law students in Germany. One was from Turkey, and another was from Germany. Do you remember them at all?
Wow, that's bringing back, how many years ago was that? Again, the connections of either they're saying, well, of course, for most of them, they just said, we were not aware that you had a center here in Jamestown, and they're just traveling through. Yeah. They have no clue. And I'm saying, okay, you got a German connection here, and you've got some time for me to take you around. I would always take them to Chautauqua Institution and walk around the grounds, take them to the Raber's Amish Toy Factory, a few places around town, and say, also, I'd like to take you to the Robert H. Jackson Center, and you may have a little bit of information or knowledge about Jackson and the Nuremberg trials. And they didn't know that much about it. But then taking them up there, it was like, whoa, this is unbelievable. Very first German exchange student. He was a big kid. He wrestled for Frewsburg, played on the football team at that time because they didn't have soccer. And just a big, stocky kid. He was in a Ruder club, rowing club in Germany, and now he teaches rowing for junior high students over there. And I took him up to the casino, up to the lake, showed him the sign for the chicken wings because I knew he'd never had them before. And I said, I says, do you want, I says, there's mild, medium, and hot. And I says, I'm going to get some medium. And he's, no, I want them hot. Well, his interpretation, this was before school started. He'd only been in the U.S. for a week or so, and he didn't know what that term hot meant. Hot is heiße. And I think he was thinking, well, I want them cooked. I want hot wings. And I could not get across to him that I'm talking about the spiciness of the chicken wings. But so he was not going to admit the fact that those things were too hot even for him. And you could see he was flushed and sweating, and of course he couldn't drink beer, had just a soft drink at the time. Even though he had, by the age of, let's see, he was just going on 17, and he had already, as a member of the Ruder Club, had plenty of beer to drink in Germany. And he would have loved to have been able to drink a beer at that moment. So,
did you, being a docent, you never know who comes in. Here comes Chautauqua. Did you ever have somebody that kind of surprised you, or that was a lawyer who had argued before the Supreme Court, who was a
There were a few who told me their background fairly when I asked them right off the bat, you know, what's the connection with Jackson and so forth. And a lot of them just say, oh, we don't know anything about this. Or we know a little bit about Jackson, or we know a little bit about Nuremberg, but again, we saw the brochure, we've got time on our hands, so we're going to check this out. But there's a few of them that came in, as you said, that were a lawyer or a judge, and right away I was going, I'm going to say something, and they're going to say, that's not right. I just knew there was going to be something legally that I was going to say about Lend-Lease, or the reason for picking Nuremberg, or just something about his legal or lawyer background that I had been taught, or that I'd tried to learn for myself, that wasn't going to be 100% correct. And it did happen a few times. And a few times I slightly argued with them about what they felt was truth, or the facts that they knew compared to what I had been told.
Yeah. Did you listen to a lot of programs? You were always, I looked out there and there you were. Any particular programs that you listened to and said, wow, I can't believe I'm hearing this, or something that really captured your attention?
Well, I'm trying to narrow it down. There's been just so many speakers. Whenever there's been a new one coming up, you know, I'm circling it on the calendar saying, again, I'm going to learn something new today. The one that I didn't think they were going to pull off, just a year, 2 years ago, we had there was a professor and some students, and they did a sketch, and they took different parts. A couple of them really got into it with even with the German accent and so forth. At first I thought, and who would the audience be for this? Because if it's an adult audience at night versus students, would college students, this might work. I don't know if it would work with high school students. And after it was done, I said, yes. Not 8th graders, not yet. They're not ready for that. And because you had to have some historical understanding and background. But I thought that was pretty unusual and pretty neat.
Yeah, you know, one group along those lines was the Barnett case, and that's where they had a couple of students that kind of foretold what it was like in a concentration camp being a Jehovah's Witness.
Yes.
And I remember that was just riveting.
Yes.
Just riveting. As a result of you being there, did you get a sense of what you have gained over the last 7 or more years as a Jackson Now student and aficionado? Do you get a sense of the Jackson Center's benefit?
Well, because of being a docent there, and because of my good experiences in the people that I've met and what I've learned, it always means that I'm looking forward again for those connections. If I'm even walking around up at Chautauqua on a Wednesday, on Education Day or something, and strike up a conversation with somebody, in the back of my mind I'm thinking, are you here for a while? You're looking for places to go and see? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to recommend the Jackson Center. And a couple of people I've just said, I don't know who is, depending on your schedule, there's going to be a docent there from 10 to 2. I said, if you want me to, you can call me and I will go there and override whoever's the docent, just because I know you and I've invited you. And I did that once or twice. Somebody was there and I just said, I'm here with these friends that I've just met, and I'm going to take them around. So there's always that. Jackson's always in the back of my mind wherever I go. and being in Nuremberg and or with some of the other German families, you know, you could consider, you have to be careful if it could be a touchy subject. Nazi persecution, or the prosecution of the Nazis at Nuremberg. Some, you don't know how some Germans, now this is third generation and so forth, away from the war and away from Nuremberg, how are they going to take that? So I tread a little bit carefully when talking about it, when they say, well, what do you do back home? And I'm talking about being the president of this and chairman of that, and I said, but I'm also a tour guide at the Jackson Center, and explain a little bit about who that's about. And some of them give you a okay, and others are just saying, really? You know, tell me more about that.
Yeah. Did Carol Drake ever get you conned into working up at the International Law Dialogues?
Working there, no. I went up a couple of times. Yeah, when she's coming towards you, you kind of walk in the other direction, saying, uh-oh. But I helped out, whether it's at the Jackson Center or at Chautauqua. If she's going to ask me, or anybody's going to ask me to do something, sure, I'll do what I can to help out.
Did you drive at all? Did she have you drive? Any of the speakers?
She asked me, or she or you maybe asked me to go to Buffalo Airport to pick up some of the lawyers coming in. And, you know, I'm thinking, okay, I don't know where they're coming from, but these were, some were coming from Europe, some from Africa, and some from Phnom Penh in Cambodia, and they're all coming in to compare notes and so forth. So I get up to the airport, I've got my sign, and you know, picked up these 2 or 3 guys, barely got all of their luggage into the trunk of the car, and I think I was taking them right to Chautauqua, and then they were going to come down by bus for dinner later or whatever. But I'm driving along and listening to them because I don't know if they sat together on the plane, but they were coming from different directions. And so I'm just listening to what they're talking about. And a couple of times I said, should I keep my mouth shut? Twice they said something, and I said, I got to jump in here with the basic knowledge that I had, and you ask a question. And they looked at me like, why do you want to know that, or how do you know that? So I look forward to doing that.
Yeah.
And a couple times, well, we had people that were speakers, and then they were staying at the Oaks. And I said, okay, I'll stick around and take them back to the apartment there, so forth. So that's been fun too.
Well, they're unique individuals, and to have the chance to have them here to salute Jackson, actually.
Yes, yes. And again, the connections there, it's amazing that we don't realize that there are so many, especially people in the legal profession, that know about Jackson and have been taught about Jackson in a lot of his decisions. And 2-3 days ago in the paper there was an article, and there was a quote from, this is 1954, Robert H. Jackson, and I read it over 3 or 4 times. Although Jackson was supposed to be this country lawyer and be very clear and concise in his wording, I read it 3 times and I still don't know what he said. I mean, because it's legal, it's just lawyerly.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would have to read what he said before and maybe after it, but just take that one paragraph out of there. I said, I'm frustrated because I'm not sure exactly what he was getting at, because there were still some highfalutin legal law words in there.
We don't want to dumb it down too much.
So that's been fun and amazing too, that the number of times that Jackson is referred to, or one of his decisions, one of his, some statement, and they're popping up in the paper in Life or Time magazine all the time. It's amazing.
Well, that's the amazing thing for all of us is that 20 years ago, we'll be celebrating our 20th anniversary coming up and having a chance to just see how much we've grown in the community on the knowledge of having Jackson and having many people who are part of his world actually here.
Yes, yes. It's, I've noticed just in these last 10 years though, just like the, you're interviewing the World War II vets, and we're losing them at a rapid pace. And then the Korean, and now some of the individuals that I, knew or have associated with with the Vietnam War, that they're dying off. And so going all the way back another 20, 30 years to 1945 or 44, they're not, and you've been lucky that you've been able to interview and video a lot of these individuals that knew Jackson face to face, and you've got them now, and a lot of them have passed away. So Father Fuchs, for example, I have a picture of him, and he and I on either side of the Jackson bust. So you just don't know. But the one thing about the Jackson Center is that we're capturing a lot of that, and so that's going to be there forever. That people who don't want to, those college students, interns coming in, can now go back in that archives and research this material. It is great.
Well, and now we've archived you, and we can now say we're complete.
No, not even close. Keep going.
Thank you. Well, you've done a great job. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate coming in. I'm happy to come in anytime and help out.
Thank you.
So come to the Jackson Center, and I'll give you a tour.